All right, guys, Ron White here, two-time USA memory champion. I have dedicated my life to the last over 30 years to learning things faster. So this ChatGPT, this artificial intelligence comes along, and I'm like, you know what? What is it that it's saying about accelerated learning? So today I'm going to type in a question. I'm going to ask ChatGPT a question on learning. It's going to give me its answer. And I'm not here to prove ChatGPT wrong. I'm not here to prove artificial intelligence wrong. That's probably a losing battle for a mortal human like me, all right? This computer is going to outsmart me probably every time in this artificial intelligence. However, I think I want to give my perspective because there's a great thing about learning. You should always be wanting to hear different perspectives. On this channel, you always hear my perspective on learning, what I think about learning. But I like bringing in other people to hear what they say about learning and then us having a dialogue. And I thought, well, why don't we do this, but not with another person, but with ChatGPT? That's the expert. So welcome to the show, ChatGPT. Everybody applaud. Oh, there we go. ChatGPT, thank you for being here. I want to ask you today, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, my question. And here is my question. How to use spaced repetition when studying. And look at that. Okay. All right. Here we go. My guest today, artificial intelligence, says, and I'm going to give my feedback on this, spaced repetition is a technique for improving the retention of information by spreading out the intervals of time between studying that information. The idea behind spaced repetition is that by spacing out your study sessions over time, you can help lock in the information into your long-term memory. That's a great little synopsis there. And then it goes on and it gives us 6 points on how to do spaced repetition. So let's talk about let's read what each one of these 6 points are, and then let's talk about them. Number one, start by breaking up your study session into small chunks. Instead of trying to cram all your studying into one long session, break it up into smaller, more manageable chunks. That's very true, and I'm not so sure how that fits into spaced repetition, other than because you're breaking up your study sessions, you're spacing them out. I guess that's spaced studying. I don't know if it's spaced repetition, though, unless you're repeating. But certainly, spacing out your studying and taking breaks is valuable. You know, we've talked about on this channel before the Pomodoro technique invented by Francisco Cirillo in the 1980s. And he came up with an idea, and he called it the Pomodoro technique. A lot of kitchen timers, when you're cooking in the 1980s, were shaped like tomatoes. And I believe it's Italian word for tomato is pomodoro. So he developed what he called the Pomodoro technique. Set that timer for 20 minutes, study. When the timer goes off, you take a break. And that's kind of what this is saying right here. Break your studying up into small chunks. So valid. Try the Pomodoro technique. Study for 20 minutes. When the timer goes off, take a 5-minute break. Study for 20 minutes. Take a 5-minute break. Study for 20 minutes. Take a 5-minute break. Do that a couple times, and then maybe you take a 30 or a 40-minute break. But definitely breaking it up into chunks does hold your attention. So spaced repetition, number one, studying breaks. Number two, space out your study sessions. Isn't that what you just said? Let's see if it goes into more detail, though. Instead of studying all at once, space out your study sessions. For example, you could study for 20 minutes. That's what I just said. Okay, all right. Take a break and then study for another 20 minutes. Okay, that's literally, they're literally quoting the top Pomodoro technique here. So fair enough. That's fair enough. But I think point 1 and 2, they're saying the same thing. So we got 6 points. Use flashcards or other memory aids. Okay, this is big. This is huge. This is a huge point. So bear with me here for a second. Use flashcards or other memory aids. Flashcards and other memory aids can be useful tools when using spaced repetition. They also allow you to test yourself on the material you're trying to learn and to focus on the areas where you need more practice. Guys, this is big. A lot of times people will tell me, Ron, I can't remember what I studied 2 weeks ago. And I'll be like, okay, well, did you Have you reviewed what you learned 2 weeks ago? No, I haven't, and I can't remember it. My memory is terrible. No, your memory's not terrible. Your review is terrible. You must review. You must review. You study for a history test today, you get up tomorrow and you're going to go back to studying for the history test. Before you study the new information today, review everything that you learned yesterday. When I memorized the United States Constitution, 4,500 words, all right? I memorized everybody who died in the war in Afghanistan from the U.S. military, 2,400 people, 7,500 words, and I write this out on a wall. When I was memorizing the Afghanistan memory wall, I would memorize 50 people a day. On a good day, 50 people. That was always the goal if I was memorizing. So I'd memorize 50 people today, but on day 2, before I went on and memorize the next 50, I would review the 50 from the day prior. So day 1, I memorized 50. Day 2, I review the prior 50, and then I add on the next 50. So day 3, now I got 100, right? I review the previous 100, and then I add on another 50. Day 4, I review the previous 150, and then I add on another 50. And then I got 200 pieces of information. There were some days, there were some weeks when I was doing nothing but review. Review is crucial to the memory process. And it's something that people underestimate when they're studying. They just look at the information like, how long will it take me to memorize this? But they're not factoring in the review time. Review time is the most overlooked thing in memory by far, in my opinion, and it hits on it right here. Use flashcards or other memory aids to review. I do something that I call audio flashcards. So when I was learning the United States Constitution, I would get a microphone, I would get my cell phone, and I would say, "We the people of the United States," and then I would pause. "In order to form a more perfect union," and then I would pause. "Establish justice," and then I would pause. Then later on, the next day, when I'm listening to the recording says, "We the people of the United States." And in that pause, I say what comes next. "In order to form a more perfect union." And then the recording says, "In order to form a more perfect union." And then I say, "Establish justice." And then the recording says, "Establish justice." What is this doing? It's a flashcard, and it's enabling me to review when I'm driving, when I'm jogging, when I'm riding on an airplane, riding on a bus, in line at the grocery store. I got the headphones in. I am reviewing what I learned using flashcards. Another flashcard system that I use PowerPoints a lot, where I'll just create a PowerPoint and I'll put the answer, and then I'll put the answer, and I'll put the answer, and I'll flip through the PowerPoint saying the answers that come next. So when I review, I use flashcards, whether they're visual or audio. Why flashcards? Because if you're just reading the information again, you can trick yourself into thinking you know the information. Flashcards don't give you the information. The answer's on the other side or on the break. It's after the pause. And that is so important in review, for you not to have the answer, for you to say the answer, and then flip the card or wait for the audio to say the answer. That is so crucial to review. Otherwise, you're going to be able to trick yourself into thinking that you know the material. So start by taking study breaks, space out your study session, use flashcards, test yourself. Yes, this is huge. Self-testing is one of the best ways to use spaced repetition effectively. By testing yourself on the material you're trying to learn, this is huge. This is huge. You can identify areas where you need more practice and monitor your progress over time. Let's go back to the Afghanistan memory wall. 7,500 words I memorized. In December of 2012, in my office, I had whiteboards all around the office. I would write out the Afghanistan wall from memory on these whiteboards. There was nobody there but me. It would take me hours and hours and hours and hours of just writing. After I wrote these out for hours and hours and hours, then I would get the answer book and I would go back and I would grade it and I would circle all my errors. Sometimes my errors were spelling words. Sometimes my errors were a wrong rank or whatever. And then I would count the errors. 7,500 words. I remember the first time I wrote it out, I had like 700 errors. It was a 9% error rate. 9%. I'm like, whoa, this is not acceptable. I do not want to be doing this tribute to the fallen and have almost 10% errors. Do you know what I did? In my review, I focused on the 9% that I was getting wrong. Then I wrote it out again, and I checked for errors, and it was 6%. I circled the 6%, and in my review, I focused on the 6% errors. And then I wrote it out again, and then I was at 4%. I circled the errors. In my review, I focused on the 4% errors, and then I wrote it out again. When I wrote that wall out from memory, February 28th, 2013, 7,500 words, and then the next day I went and checked for errors, I made less than 5 errors. Let me say that again. Not 5%, 5. 5 errors out of 7,500. I'd gone from 700 errors to 5. How did I do that? By focusing on what I was getting wrong, and in my review, studying that more. This is a great tool of spaced repetition and something that you must do. Focus on what you're getting wrong and devote your time there. Still go back and review the stuff that you know so you don't forget it, but focus on, give 2 or 3 times the study time to what you don't know. Let's see. Number 5, adjust the intervals between study sessions based on how well you're remembering the material over time. Adjust the intervals between your study sessions. Shorten the intervals. Okay, this is exactly what I just said. Shorten the intervals from a material that you're struggling with and lengthen them in the materials that you're comfortable with. That's exactly what I just said. The stuff that you don't know, study it more. Shorten the intervals. The stuff that you do know, lengthen the intervals. You don't have to go back and review it as much. And the last thing here on spaced repetition is instead of focusing on a single topic, try interleaving different topics or subjects by studying different subjects or topics. Interleaving, that's a word that I haven't heard before. I guess what it means is if you're studying for a history test and a science test and a Spanish test, study the history a while, then go and study the Spanish a while, and then go and study the other test for a while and kind of interleave them. Take breaks and go in between them. It's going to give your mind breaks. Let's ask ChatGPT, what does it mean by interleaving? So let's say, what is interleaving? Boom. Interleaving is interleaved practice is a technique for improving learning and performance by alternating the practice or different skills. Okay, so you're studying for a history test, you stop studying for that, you study for a Spanish test, and then you go, okay, I get it. So here's the idea of spaced repetition, essentially from ChatGPT. You learn something, then later on you review it. You figure out what you are having trouble with, you review that more. You review the other stuff that you know, but less frequently if you know it, and then you space out the repetition. Now, if you want to get my teaching on how to memorize or learn, go to blackbeltmemory.com, click the link down below. I'll put a link in the comments or a link in the description. My course, Black Belt Memory. Click the link down below, get a free gift on improving your memory, and get my Black Belt Memory course. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I do appreciate the likes. I appreciate the thumbs up. Comment down below with some of how do you study? What are your study tips? What are you asking ChatGPT? And we want to thank you for ChatGPT, our guest, joining us today on the show. We will see you later. I appreciate it, ChatGPT.